Well, hey, everyone. Happy Math Crush Monday. It is Monday. I almost said Wednesday. Doesn't even rhyme. Happy Math Crush Monday. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Shannon Kiebler. I'm the moderator of our Math Expressions user group on Facebook. If you're joining us from there, hello. Say hi in the chat. I'd love to know that you're watching. And then I'm also the creator of the Math Genius Squad, which is our online professional development for users of Math Expressions. So we are excited because we are talking tonight specifically about fractions on a number line. And this is one of my favorite things to teach. It's one of the things that our students struggle with the most. And I am giving you some tips of the trade that are deep in the vault. So our members get access to some of these tips in their lesson videos, and there's some other resources, but I've never actually shared these strategies publicly in our group and other places. So I can't wait to get started. And please let me know along the way if you end up with any questions. So I'm going to share a couple of ideas today. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We're talking about fractions on a number line. These are the things that we're going to address today. We're going to talk about how to use a bar model. We're going to talk about how to use color coding, and then we're going to talk about a daily activity that you can do to help students with these number lines. So as we talk about these fractions on a number line, the first strategy is using a bar model. It's one of my favorite strategies. So generally, students understand the bar model. They can draw the bar, and you'll have to excuse the poor drawing. Okay, they know that this is a hole. They know that they can partition it. So some students struggle with that partitioning, but with practice, I actually find that students are much more successful with the bar than they are the number line. So we want to practice the bar often, meaning when we have transition time, we have dead time in the classroom, I might say, class, I want you to show me 3 holes, and I want you to divide 1 into 4s, 1 into 6, and 1 into 8s. Okay, so they're drawing 3 holes on the board. They're dividing each one because they just need practice. And I can't give them as much practice in my lessons as they need. So we're waiting for Johnny to find his pencil for the 3rd time today. I'm going to say, friends, everyone else on your whiteboard, would you quickly show me a fraction bar and divide it into, let's say, 4s? So hopefully this is now a skill that students have used often and they know how to do a fraction bar. So I made a fraction bar, I've divided it into 4s. Then I'm going to say, now I want to show you my number line. So we know that a number line goes on in both directions forever and ever. Numbers start today in our class at 0, but we know as we get into 6th grade, there are numbers that actually come before 0. So we can see that this is what indicates that, right? That arrow on the line tells us that those numbers keep going in that direction. But I have to mark off where I'm stopping. So in this case, the bar stops right here, and that's 1 hole. So I'm going to have my number line stop right here. And so right now, this number line goes from 0 to 1. Just like I say, trace the hole. So I would say, trace the hole for my bar, which is always one of my rules. Okay, and they trace the hole. And then I would say, okay, now trace the hole on your line. And they would trace the hole right there. Okay, so now I have my hole. I'm going to say if I have the markings on my bar, all I'm going to do is carry those lines down and I can partition my number line. So this is where now I can say when I am with like a candy bar, the area is what I'm measuring. So a bar model measures the area. A number line measures length, is a length model. So we're going to go from here to here and I'm going to loop it. And I can see that's the same size of a piece. So I have 1/4 of the candy bar, or I've gone 1/4 of the distance. So I'm going to label 1/4 here, and I would label 1/4 here. Now, when I talk about unit fractions, I know that if I'm talking about this bar, I can go another 1/4, which means I've gone 1/4 and 1/4, but all together, I've eaten 2/4. So if I'm on my number line, I've gone 1/4, I've gone another 1/4, but on a number line, I'm counting that entire area. So I'm going to loop the whole distance, and now I've gone 2/4. So I can say, well, I have another 4th. So here I am. I'm going to shade this, and now I have 1/4 because I have 1/4 and 1/4 and 1/4. I don't say 1/4, 2/4, 3/4 because they're all 1/4 size pieces. So I can say the same thing here. I have 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, but now I'm going to loop the total distance. And the total distance is this whole area. And now we've gone 3/4. Just like if I were to say, but if I ate all of that part of the candy bar, I've gone 3/4, or I've eaten 3/4. So you can see I can put my bar above my number line. And for whatever reason, students have a much easier time seeing the links when I show the bar above. It also makes it way easier to partition the number line when I know how to partition the bar. So, of course, this idea would continue if I said, well, now I'm at 0 and I have to go to 2. I know that there would also be a 1. So that means I'm going to get 2 holes, and I'm going to use different colors to make that really clear. And then I say outline my hole, and I have 1 here, and I outline my hole, 1 here. Okay, outline another hole. I have a hole here and I have a hole here. How many holes do you see? And you can easily see I have 2 holes. Now, the numbers that need to go on my number line, maybe I'm saying, oh, I need them to be 4s, okay? Or I need them to be 8s. I'm going to partition my bars and I'm going to drag and drop my lines down. And then I can go and label. I can label the parts of my bar. I can label the parts of my number line. So looping is another great suggestion here. So looping is actually taught in math expressions, and it's something that helps students to see that entire length. If you choose not to loop, the second strategy you could use here is to do color coding, which is similar to what I've done here. But the problem with all fractions on a number line, including when second grade and third grade teach measurement and they're teaching the ruler, is that students don't count lengths, they count tick marks. And that is not representative of a number line or a measurement model. So if I look at this number line, the reason that measurement is so difficult for a lot of our students is they're going to count the tick marks. So they go 1, 2, they don't count, wait a minute, I can't say 1 here. I haven't traveled 1 space yet. So we loop it to say, I have to go this whole way in order for me to say, now I've gone 1 whole length. And in this case, if I circle all the lengths, I have 4 lengths, knowing I didn't partition that extremely well. Okay, so this would be 1/4 of a length. And if I go from here to here, I've gone 2 lengths, 2 of the 4 lengths, I have gone 2/4. So let's look at it with the color coding though. I can loop it, of course, but then I can also say, here's 0 and here's 1, and I broke it into fourths. And now I'm going to say, I'm going to color code, and I'll say this way, right? From here to here, I don't get to call it 1 yet because I haven't gotten there, right? Or 1/4. I can't go call it yet because I haven't gotten there. So I go the whole length. But when I do that, and I even alternate colors, you can see it here. Okay, students can see how many lengths there are, and now they know, well, this is just 1 length, loop it, it's 1/4. So the color coding of the lengths is also extremely helpful. This is why I have students use the white rulers that are in math expressions, like a paper copy, and we make paper versions of our rulers to start. I do not let students use like the rulers from Walmart or wherever, because when you do that, students already see the fractional lengths written on there. And it's extremely difficult to see the lengths. So if I give them a paper ruler, we actually color and go every other color and color in the lengths. So they can see from 0 to 1, there's actually 8 lengths if we're talking about 8s. Or from 0 to 1, there's 4 lengths. It's just so much easier to see the length model so that we do not count the tick marks. So this is a conservation of number. This is a rational counting issue. This is a cardinality issue. If I say, where is 1/4? And students just say it's here. And I'm like, no, they had to go the whole length to get to 1/4. Okay, so if I had a number or a bar model and I said, where is 2/4? And students just point to this one, I'm like, that's a cardinality issue. That's not 2/4. This is 2/4, right? So I want you to encourage students to do bars. Now, if there are fractions with multiple numbers, multiple denominators, okay, so let's just say you have to put 1/4 and 1/3 on a number line. Well, the first thing I want them to do is I want them to think about benchmarks, and I want them to think about what they know about fractions. Okay, so right out of the gate, instead of trying to partition the number line into fourths and thirds, which visually is really difficult to do, I'm going to have them instead think, well, what do I already know about those denominators? Meaning, if I cut something into 4 pieces, those pieces are going to be smaller than if I cut something into 3 pieces. So no matter what, I know 1/3 has to come before 1/4. Right? So I can place these generally on the number line just by number reasoning, which is what is the key, the crux of the standard in third, fourth, and fifth grade. When we really talk about fractions, it's about reasonability. And what do I understand with fraction sense? So before I even place them on the number line, I know that 1/4 has to come before 1/3 because we know that these pieces are smaller, right? So it's going to go 1/4 and then it's going to go 1/3. So that's a reasonability. The other thing I can do though is I can actually make a number line above and I can make a number line below. I can make all of the zeros start together, all of the ones start together, and I'll break 1 into fourths. And now I know that this is 1/4. I'll break the other into thirds, and now I can tell that that's 1/3. I'm just going to drag those numbers now onto my one number line. So putting a number line above or putting a number line below all the different denominators, and then you just track those numbers up to the same number line. So that's another strategy that could work for them. But first we want to go with benchmark reasoning and fraction sense. Okay, so what do I already know about these sizes? Now, when you look at that, another thing we're going to think about is we're going to think about benchmarks renaming everything. So this is a rule for me, is we always outline that whole, but we also name everything. So let's just say I go back to my number line and I know that this number line happens to be 0 and 2. So then I'm going to do a 1 here. Okay, so I have 0, 1, and 2. And I have, let's say, 2/3, I have 1/4, and I have 2/8. Okay, something like that. So I already know I have thirds, fourths, and eighths. I'm going to rename everything you see in thirds, fourths, and eighths because that will help me think about that benchmark and where it's going to go. So first I'm going to name everything I see with thirds. So what's another name for 0? Another name for 0 is 0/3. Another name for 1 is 3/3. Another name for 2 is 6/3. Okay, great. What else do we know? We know fourths. So I know 0 is the same as 0/4. I know that it's 4/4. And I know that this is 8/4. I'm just renaming everything. So I can go with eighths. I know that this is 0/8. I know that this is 8/8. I know that this is 16/8. Okay. Okay. Now what else do I know? I know that I could rename this, right? I could talk about making it a fraction or a mixed number. I'm also going to mark my halves because halves are a benchmark. So I'm going to go half between each one. The first one that comes to mind is I just know that those are called 1/2. I always mark 1/2. So are there any other denominators that would have a half? Well, I know that 1/4 could also be unforced, could be 2/4, and I know that I could do 4/8, right? So I'm going to name both of those halves. Everything across the board, I'm going to rename everything because now do we have a better idea about where 2/3 has to go? If 0/3 is here and 3/3 is here, where in the world would 2/3 go? Okay, where would generally 1/4 go? Because I can estimate based on those benchmark fractions where I think they're going to go. So renaming everything. Now let's go to some of the rules of the trade. Okay, so I have, wrong direction. Some reminders. I'm going to use them all the time. So when I do fractions and math expressions, there's generally, and whether like third grade, it's like one lesson, fourth and fifth grade, it's one lesson, and sometimes it's brought up in a couple of others, but then it kind of stops. It's like, well, that's a strategy. Now you have it. No, they don't. Okay. Once is not enough. And it is the most tested item in the fraction world on all standardized tests. Fractions on a number line shows up everywhere in multiple different facets. So I know that I have to show fractions on a number line frequently. So my rule is once you learn it, you always have to prove it. You always use it. Okay. So for example, I learn fraction bars. I learn fractions on a number line. Now I'm going into comparing fractions. Let's just say, I will say, compare the fractions using a bar model, compare the fractions using a number line. Now we just do it. We're now moved on to adding fractions. I'm like, oh, defend your thinking. How did you know how to add 3/4 and 2/4? What did you get? Yep. You have to prove it with a bar model. You have to prove it on a number line. Like now we just always do them both. Now, when we get into fifth grade and we also learn the area model, I'm like, oh, now we're not going to lose it. We're going to do the fraction bar, we're going to do the number line, and we're going to do the area model. And it could be that I have like a triad and each kid has to do it a different way. So not every kid is doing it 3 ways every time, but they need to do it at least enough that they're getting the repetition and they can see it and prove it both ways. they have to have more repetition. The second reminder I want to give you is to rename everything, capitalize on those patterns and benchmarks. So everything has a different name. What's another name for 1/2? What's another name for 0? And the more we have them constantly rename, the more they're going to see the patterns, and they will start to be able to place fractions based purely on what they know about fractions and fraction sense with all that pattern work. Color is your best friend. The more you can color code, then we know that is a really significant instructional strategy. It's a great strategy scaffold for our language learners, for anyone who has any sorts of deficits in math, or just for those that are visual learners. I want you to color code as much as you can. Now, what is an activity? Our final thing for tonight. An activity that you may want to do with your students is a fractions on a number line daily or weekly, but you can't let it go. So let me show you what that might look like. I'm going to bring up a different window here. And I want you to think about in your classroom, after you've taught this, where's a place that you could put a line in your room? Okay, so maybe you have a space like a kind of a tile space where the kids line up at the door, like at the back of the room. The back of the room doesn't have carpet, it just has tile. You put painter's tape on the back of the room on the floor. That is a line. It just turned into a number line. Maybe you can hang a piece of string across a bulletin board. Maybe it's above your whiteboard or smartboard. Maybe it's below your whiteboard or smartboard. Maybe you just wherever. Where could you put a line that is somewhat permanent for the whole school year? Okay. And now that you have a line, you're making kids think about where in proximity, okay, it's called magnitude comparison, will these numbers go on that number line? So let's pretend that you went ahead and put a number line on the top of your whiteboard, okay, or somewhere where kids could touch. And on their desks, you give them a sticky note, an index card, I don't care, whatever you want to use, piece of paper with a tape on it. Okay. And so let's just say this 1/2 is that, and it's on a sticky note, but every single kid has a sticky note on their desk. And their job is they come in to take attendance, quote unquote. They have to put their number on the number line. Now, you're going to always have benchmarks. So let's just say that this right now is going to be our number line to 2. And you're going to say, whatever sticky note you have, you're going to show me you're here today because you're going to put your sticky note up on the board. And whoever sells a sticky note on their desk is obviously absent. But they're putting those numbers based on where other people put their previous numbers. So if I'm in, like, for example, 1/2, well, I'm like, oh, well, I can easily tell, like, that one has to go about right here. They go place it on the number line. Okay, they're 4/4. They're thinking, well, what is 4/4? Okay, well, 4/4 is the same as 1 whole. And then someone else has 2/4. Like, oh no, where do I put it? They start to stack. Okay, so every day they have, or once a week, maybe however you want to do it, kids have multiple opportunities for them to place numbers on the number line, and they start stacking equivalencies. So when you get a couple extra minutes in the day, you can say, let's look at our number line. What do we notice? What are some patterns that we're seeing? Anytime it's about 1/2, what do we already notice? Now, I want you to think about, like, even mixed numbers. So sometimes it's 8/2, and other times it's 1 and 4/8. Right? We write it as a mixed number. We write it as a whole number. We write it as a fraction greater than 1, because they have to start saying, wait, those are all the same thing. Okay, so I also give them pictures then. So sometimes you get the actual number, sometimes you get a picture. What is this? What fraction is it? Where does it go? If you're in 5th grade, 4th grade, I turn these pictures into money equivalencies. The numbers turn into decimals. You already have the fractions there. So where do we think 0 and 5/10 is going to go? Where do we think when you get the card that has 5 dimes on it, where does it go? Those are equivalencies to 1/2. So they're not separate. Fractions are decimals. Decimals are fractions. So that when we introduce each piece, every different way for us to represent the number becomes a piece they can add to the number line. So my suggestion for you is to start an interactive number line. Like, I like the, attendance idea, because I have to make it a part of my day that's happening anyway. And it's not like an extra thing. It's something that is just utilizing their time better for an activity they have to do, like taking attendance. It could be a small group activity. I've seen teachers give kids these stack of cards, and it's not like a whole group activity. It's every group, when they go to that station, quote unquote, they do the number line. There's an answer key. They figure out where it goes. So you choose how you want to do it, but the more you use number lines, the better they're going to get. I can even call on individual students and give them a random fraction and say, but where do we think it's going to go? And now it turns into a number talk. Like maybe they have 6. Nowhere on our number line are there 6. So how do we use benchmarks? How do we use fractions to think about, but then where is it going to go? Right? So if you look here, last but not least, if you are in the Math Genius Squad, I already have this for you. Now, no matter what grade you teach, you get this. Okay, you have all the number lines. So we've made it now where not only was it a small group activity, but we've put it in now every single unit under the printable section. We have a lesson called bulletin boards. You go to the bulletin board and we have given you a number line setup for every single unit so that you can just keep building onto your number line. So 5th grade, for example, you start with, we'll give you like set A, and set A is all whole numbers, denominators of like 2, 4, and 8. Okay. Then we give you set B. Like once they've conquered that and you redo the number, you don't have to have a new number line every day. Take those numbers off, resort them, kids do it again. They don't need new all the time. They need to do the same one over and over again to get better and better at where those benchmarks go. When they've mastered that, now you add set B, and set B has 3rd, 6th, and let's say 9ths. Okay, then you give them the next set. The next set has all visuals. And then you go to the next set. So we've given you sets to put on this. And you get to unit 2, and we've given you all the money and the decimal equivalencies. Now you have to figure out where those go on the number line, right? So if you're in the squad, it's going to go to printables. You're going to click on the bulletin board, and the bulletin board has the number line kit. So if you did not do this when you taught your fraction unit 5th grade, you're going to go back and get it. Go back to unit 1. Do the fraction on the number line now. What a great test prep option. If you're in 4th grade, you're coming up on it. Unit 6, you still have time. Okay, you're going to go get the number line activity. All your number line activities up until now have been about whole numbers. Okay, but starting in unit 6, you're going to have it. 3rd grade, unit 4, you're either in it or you should be finishing it. Okay, go back to that unit. You have the entire number line, fractions on a number line, the multiple kits. If you're not in the Math Genius Squad, you can still go buy just the fractions on a number line kit. We have them for 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and you can get them on my website. So before you leave, put something you're thinking that you're going to use or you're going to do. And if you're watching this video on replay, add it to the comments. And then, my friends, we are finished for the day. I hope it was good for you and that you learned something new. We will see you next week. Bye for now.